This video is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon. Hey guys, I'm here with a video showing you how I made the staff for my Fantasy Uraraka cosplay. To start off, I took a very long PVC pipe and broke it down into about 4 pieces. This isn't a absolutely necessary step, however, I needed mine to break down so that it could fit into a suitcase because I needed to take it on an airplane, and this is how that was going to happen. I used contact cement to secure the connector to one of the PVC pipes, like to one side, not to both, otherwise that kind of defeats the point of the connector. I didn't get video of this next part, well, not a lot of it or really anything that was important, but I used a heat gun to heat up the PVC pipes and then shape them. After you heat them up enough, they should become very flexible, really easy to bend, so I just shaped them into the shape that I needed, which was this wavy, more like natural branch like shape, and then I curved or rounded out the very top into a circle to create the base of the top piece. To further shape or create the base of the top part of her staff, I wrapped just a giant sheet of 2mm EVA foam around it and pressed that together. Like, I put glue on both halves and then pressed them together so that I just had this giant square that was glued around this top piece, because this is just what I found it easiest to do. And once that was all glued into place, I took a marker and just roughly traced out the shape that I wanted and then cut that out. And then I started applying the material that's going to make up a majority of this prop, and that is Cosplay clay, which I have a link to down in the description below. It's just like clay EVA foam, so once it dries, it works exactly like EVA foam. You can sand it, prime it, paint it, and heat it up just like normal EVA foam, that it's just in clay form, so you can use it to sculpt stuff, which is how I made the rest of this staff. You can totally ignore that red foam. That red foam was just me testing it out to see if I liked the look of things, and then I went back over it because I did want it to be puffier anyways with Cosplay clay. So what I did was I applied Cosplay clay in giant clumps to the staff, and then while looking at the reference photo, shaped it in a way that mimicked what I was looking at. So I added like the she has like some parts where it kind of like gets a lot more poofy looking than other parts, so I made sure to add a lot more clay to those sections and then add grooves, like wider grooves in between the different sections. Again, if you look at a reference photo, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a little hard to explain, but there is like sections to her staff, like a lot, like all of it has like this wood-like texture to it, so it has a lot of tiny grooves. However, there's much larger grooves where the sections of the staff kind of just separate a bit more, especially around the top part. So I did my best just to mimic that. And then I scratched in tiny little grooves to mimic the wood-like texture using some clay sculpting tools. Be sure to have a bowl of water nearby because you will need it. This clay dries a little bit quickly just on the surface level. However, if you just apply some water to the top of it, it becomes moldable once again, since it isn't fully dry, just that very top layer is starting to dry a little bit. So I made sure I had water nearby and used that to shape stuff. After I was finished molding the top part of the staff, I moved on to molding the rest of the staff. And to do that, I actually just added clay foam around the attachments. Like, I made sure the staff was all pieced together and then added foam all the way around the attachments. This way the grooves lined up with one another when it was like, you know, fully put together. However, after this was dried, I went back in with a box cutter and cut around where the connector needed to like come apart. So this way it could still come apart in the end, but it would still pretty much line up design-wise with the other pieces. And from there, I just kept adding more EVA foam clay to the rest of the staff and carving in these wood details. I did have to let part of the staff dry in between like sections just because I needed to be able to hold some part of the staff in order to shape it, and I obviously could not hold clay that had just been applied because it is not dry yet. So this did take a couple days to make. Most of that was waiting on the drying time because it does take like a day for it to dry, sometimes more if there's puffier parts like at the top. However, if you want to speed up that drying process, you can totally use something else to build up the base and then just apply the clay foam on top of that. I've seen people use aluminum foil to build up a base and then just filled in cosplay clay and added like a layer on top of that to be able to shape it into the way they want it shaped. Another option for this, if you don't have access to cosplay clay or if you're looking for something that might be a little bit cheaper, is you can totally create some pretty similar wood-like texture using paper mache, like newspaper dipped in glue and water. Once everything was dried, I went ahead and added in some further details, or like kind of like deeper grooves and just some more wood-like texture. I just brought that out a little bit more in certain spots, just wherever I thought looked good. And I did this using my Dremel, just because when it dried, some of the groove marks that I made did get a little bit lost because I think it either shrinks. I think it shrinks a little bit when it dries. So just a teeny bit, not enough to be noticeable, but when you have like some thin carvings in it, you might lose that detail if you don't make them deep enough the first go around, which I definitely didn't. I also just wanted some wider carvings that the tool I was using didn't give me, so I went ahead and went in and created some more of those carvings. I just kind of wanted to give a little bit more depth to this prop, and that is how I did it. I masked off all of the pieces where I needed where the things connect to one another, just to avoid primer and paint getting on it in this next part, because that will make it not fit later on. If you do cover that in primer and paint, it will end up being too thick and it won't fit anymore, and you'll have to scratch it all away, and that's really annoying. So I just masked it off with some tape, and then I primed it with about 5 layers of wood glue and started painting. I used an airbrush to paint this piece, however, acrylic paint and a paintbrush or a spray paint would totally work too. I started with a dark brown base and then added on some lighter brown colors a little bit later, and I tried to just mostly stick to adding them around any raised parts on the prop, but I also just kind of threw them in a few random spots just to give it a little bit of, I don't know, variation. I felt like that looked a little bit more natural than it being one solid color all the way through. I sealed that with a coat of clear spray paint and then added some oil paint for some further shading to do this, I used a thin paintbrush and applied black oil paint to all of the grooves around this prop. All of those little carving details had to have paint added to it, and any that got off of it, I just kind of smudged it away or wiped it away with a paper towel, because oil paint takes a very long time to dry, so you have quite a long time to work with it. Then top that off with another clear coat of spray paint. I used a clear plastic ornament to create the orb. I broke off the little piece where you're supposed to attach a hook, and then I painted the inside red using an airbrush. Again, acrylic paint works totally fine for this, as well as spray paint. I also added a darker shade of red around the very edge of both halves just to give it a little bit extra depth and dimension. This is the piece that will sit furthest in, or like that's the piece that's going to sit around the inner edges of the top of the staff, so that would be like the piece that would like realistically be like shaded, most likely, because that's where shadows would fall. So that's why I chose that specific area. The center of my prop was made to the size to this specific orb, so all I had to do was pop it in and it stayed in place. However, you can totally secure this further with glue, but once again, I wanted to make this break down, so I wanted to be sure that I could pop this in and out. And the last thing left to do was remove the tape from the staff, and it was done. And that is it for this prop. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful, and check out some of my other videos. I have more videos to come about my Fantasy Uraraka cosplay, and I have some already up as well as templates on my store Envy and Etsy for some of her pieces. Thanks for watching, have a lovely day, and bye!